Conservatives certainly don't have a monopoly on, I think, being unhelpful in the national debate. Good example this week. Okay, for the second week in a row, a Democrat, last week it was Bernie Sanders, this week it was Hillary Clinton, got a bit of an earful from the Black Lives Matter folks. We talked about it last week with our guest, Talib Kawil. Okay, so now I didn't say this last week, but I'll say it this week. There are people who say the phrase should be all lives matter. I disagree. That implies that all lives are equally at risk, and they're not. Black Lives Matter is the right but I want to read what Hillary Clinton said in response when she was being asked about this. She said, what am I supposed to do about it? In politics, if you can't explain it and you can't sell it, it stays on the shelf. I don't believe you change hearts. I believe you change laws, you change allocation of resources, you change the way systems operate. This is a fundamental difference between a lot of fuzzy-headed liberals who just don't get it, and people like Barney Frank, you perhaps, yes, not perhaps, who understand, because you're in there, you understand you have to actually change laws. You can't just change how people think.
Right, there's a difference between a hashtag and actual legislation.
Except don't, I think that's true. I think that, except that as progressives, and I describe myself as a progressive, but it's not good enough for me to be progressive in my rhetoric, but not to have that acted out in my policy. And so, for example, for a Bernie Sanders to talk about Black Lives Matter and have a conversation about income inequality, you also have to recognize that it was banks that foreclosed on black people's homes in a different way than they did other people, and incorporate that into our rhetoric. And I think that that's the challenge that progressives are having, and that frankly white progressives are having, where they see a disconnect between the Black Lives Matter movement, and it is a social movement. It isn't just an accident.
But Occupy Wall Street was a movement too, and nothing got done because they don't know how to take it to the level where shit does get done and changes.
And I think they changed the conversation. Occupy Wall Street changed the entire conversation around income inequality, around what we're doing with our, with banks and foreclosure and credit. They changed the conversation.
No, Barney Frank changed things because he was the guy who actually wrote Dodd-Frank.
But Barney Frank took that and changed laws. That's what our job is as lawmakers.
Right.
But it's okay for people out there to be pushing us to do that. They have one role, we have another.